A welcome to everybody. This session is being recorded. We will make it available for folks later on. The community engagement community of practice, we are almost 3 years old. In January, we'll be entering our third year. So it's great that we can continue to offer engagement and learning opportunities. Community of practice is simply a place to connect. It is a place to network. It is a place to learn from each other. And we are privileged to be able to bring guests in to help support our learning. My name is Michael Johnny. I am one of the advisory members for this community of practice. Today, I'm going to be one of the co-hosts. In a very scary move, they've allowed me to be the tech support lead. We'll see how that goes, but I'm also going to manage the chat room today. And if anybody knows me well, it becomes a bit of a stream of consciousness for myself. In terms of self-care, if you want to keep your, if you don't want to be on camera live, that's completely fine. I do ask if you can keep things muted. The agenda, once I get through some housekeeping items, I will pass things over to Julia Forsova, who will introduce our guest. We're privileged we'll be having a conversation from somebody from Cbrc. And then there'll be an opportunity at the end for some member updates. And if we have time to do that live, that's great. If not, we'll utilize the chat room. We certainly want to be able to create the space for folks to share what's going on in your office. What are things that you want us to know? How can we support the important work that you are doing? I would be remiss if I did not take some time and do a land acknowledgement, especially on the heels of National Truth and Reconciliation Day, which has occurred recently, and it's given me further opportunity to examine my relationship with the land in which I live, work, and play. In my privilege as a settler to this land, I continue to examine my own responsibilities to address reconciliation in Canada. But York University recognizes that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tekaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Let's see what else to share. Oh, I would ask that we don't have time for a really comprehensive go-round, which I think would be really cool. But absent that, if folks would want to introduce themselves in the chat room, your name, your role, and the territory upon which you are joining us, I think that would be a great way for us to strengthen our connections while this is going on, but not cut into time. So with that, thank you very much. My last responsibility will be to make sure that we close exactly at the top of the hour. But again, thank you for joining us. And with that, I will mute myself and pass things over to Julia Forsova. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this Lunch and Learn session, Sarah Switzer from Community-Based Research Canada. Hi, Sarah. Sarah is an adult educator, interdisciplinary scholar, and community-based participatory researcher with almost 15 years of experience supporting community-led approaches to social change with a focus on arts-based methods. She recently joined the CBR Canada team in the summer of 2021 as programs coordinator, as well as a senior researcher for the Center of Community-Based Research. And Sarah's larger program of research focuses on how to support community members meaningfully, feasibly, and ethically in program and policy change. And it is inspired by over a decade of working at the intersections of community arts, peer programming, and HIV and harm reduction. Sarah completed her PhD in environmental studies here at York University and held a short postdoctoral fellowship at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at U of T, and where Sarah explored how community engaged practitioners are adapting their participatory work with communities to online and remote settings as a result of COVID-19. And of course, the unique ethical and pedagogical challenges and issues that emerge. So today, Sarah will be talking to us about Community-Based Research Canada and how CBR Canada can support partnership building, bridging capacities, mobilizing knowledge, and championing the community-based research approach. So I'm giving the floor to Sarah, and Sarah will deliver her presentation in 2 rounds. So we will have round 1, and then we will take the first round of questions and answers, and then there will be another bite-sized piece, followed by a second round of questions and answers. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Julia and Michael, and for all of you for having me here. It's such a treat to be here. As Julia mentioned, I'm a York alumni, so it's kind of cool to be in this space, and really fortunate to share space with you today. I'm going to share my slides, just a moment. Okay, can everyone see this all right? Just give me a bit of a thumbs up or a note in chat. Can you see this okay, Julia?
I don't yet cannot see it yet.
Oh, that's weird.
It says that you've started screen sharing, but
yes,
it still looks a little dark, Sarah.
Yeah, I thought maybe there is a lag, but nothing appears yet.
It says it's sharing on my end. Let me try it again. Let's see.
Okay, let's do it.
Can you see this?
Oh, actually,
yes,
there we
yes,
go.
now, yeah, you're on now. That's great.
Okay, maybe it's just it's a little bit there's a delay. That's okay.
Yes, no worries.
Sorry, everyone. I'm just gonna refiddle here. You can share your screen so many times, and every once in a while, there's a bit of a technical glitch. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully folks can see this okay now. All right, let me know if it cuts out at any point. And thank you to everyone who's introducing yourself in chat. I'm reading along, and nice to have you here. So before we begin, here we are. I'm here on behalf of CBR Canada, Community-Based Research Canada. And I'd personally like to acknowledge the territories that the CBR Canada Secretariat is situated on, and I'll chat a little bit later about what that means. The CBR Canada Secretariat is situated on the traditional territories, the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. And in the spirit of reconciliation, CBR Canada is very committed to engaging with and learning from diverse Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada, as well as addressing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. Because land acknowledgements are so specific to place, I'm personally zooming in from Takaranto, just east of the Don River in my home, as covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaty. And I feel very privileged to be able to work, live, and build relationships on this land. As Julia explained in my bio, I wear lots of different hats, but today I'm wearing my CBR Canada hat. So to tell you a little bit about CBR Canada, we are a small organization with a very, very mighty network of about 38 institutional members, and York University, we're delighted to say, is one of those members. So CBR Canada, our mission is to advance community-based research excellence in Canada by strengthening partnerships, building capacity, mobilizing knowledge, and championing CBR among individuals, communities, and institutions. We brought together key players of community campus partnerships and research across Canada. And our mission is really to advance community-based research excellence in Canada by doing these following things, by strengthening partnerships, bridging capacity, and mobilizing knowledge. So folks are often surprised that we are an organization with no core staff. So for those of you who might be unfamiliar, we're a nonprofit social enterprise, and we're funded entirely by its members. And as I mentioned, we have 38 members, and we're very excited that York is part of them. And this is composed of mostly big and small universities across Canada, as well as a few nonprofit and community-based organizations and health authorities. So for example, the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers just came on, the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and all of our members are identified on our website. So sometimes there's a bit of confusion between what CBR Canada is and what the CBR Canada Secretariat is. So the Secretariat leads the day-to-day operations of CBR Canada and are located at the Centre for Community-Based Research in Waterloo, Ontario. It's where I also work as a senior researcher. Prior to 2008, the Secretariat was located at the University of Victoria. And then in 2008, it moved to the Center for Community-Based Research in Waterloo. And so staff from CCBR, staff from the Center for Community-Based Research, are contracted out to essentially coordinate programs and memberships at the direction of the board. And my particular role at CBR Canada is coordinating programs. And I'll be talking a bit to you today about the programs that we offer and how they might benefit all of you as researchers and administrators at York. So we have a few different goals, and I'm going to spend some time kind of going through them, and then I'll pause to take some questions. And I'm also going to invite Julia in a moment to share a little bit. So one of our primary goals is to strengthen partnerships. We do this in a variety of different ways. One way is through Ctu Expo on the right here of my screen. And this is a biannual Canadian-led community campus conference that showcases community-based research excellence. It's a tremendous conference. I used to attend as a doc student prior to getting involved with CBR Canada as a staff member. I'm not sure, Michael and Julie, if you've been involved or if other folks have been involved in this conference. If you have, yeah, I see some thumbs up. Feel free to share there. I'll open it up in a moment. But it's really a tremendous opportunity for folks to connect and network. And it's one of those like unique conferences where it's a true blend of both academic and community partners coming together to talk about the importance of community campus partnership work. So that's one way we strengthen partnerships. And I should say that the Ctu Expo last year, we had to do a mini gathering online, as one might imagine, because of COVID. And the other way that we strengthen partnerships is through our community of practice. So these are monthly online meetings to expand networks and to engage in meaningful discussions. We have two COPs. And they function, I guess, kind of similar to this COP that I'm presenting at now, but with slight differences. We have one community of practice, which is called the Community-Based Research Praxis, which is led largely by folks doing CBR, so academics, graduates, students, folks from community-based organizations, community researchers. And that community of practice, we have a rotating facilitator each month, and it's a fabulous space to connect and network. It's a COP that I also attended prior to joining CBR Canada as a staff member. Really fabulous place to network. And then the second one is the community-based research organizational culture. And this COP is specifically devoted to administrators at both academic institutions as well as nonprofit organizations. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone's faces. There we go. And I see your note there in chat, Michael, that the Ctu Expo is the best conference. That's a great testament.
What makes this even worse is I've been responsible for knowledge mobilization conferences before. So I mean, it's really a knock on myself, but I mean, they're so dynamic. I highly encourage folks, especially if there's like, oh my God, I can only go to one. It's fabulous. It ticks off a lot of boxes. So you guys have done a great job.
Thank you, Michael. And so folks know the Ctu Expo, historically it runs every 2 years. Again, this got interrupted a little bit because of COVID, and it moves locations. So it's been at Memorial University, it's been out at SFU, it's been at Laurier, I believe, it's been in Ottawa. So it does rotate. And one of the things that makes it so unique for me, as I mentioned, I attended before I joined CBR Canada, is that it's not your standard academic conference by any stretch. You know, there's workshops, there's networking sessions, there's opportunities to connect with community-based organizations. It's really, really tremendous. So I encourage folks to come on out when we announce the next one. At this moment, I'd actually love to pass it off to Julia to share a little bit about our community of practice, because Julia has been attending the COP, and what better way to plug it than have someone who's been attending chat a little bit about what it's like. Off to you, Julia.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So I'm also wearing multiple hats, in particular, you know, the two hats of a community-based research and evaluation practitioner, and more recently, a research administrator hat, as I joined the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies as a grant development specialist with a focus on community-based and Indigenous-led research. So I'm now navigating community-based research from a slightly different vantage point as a research administrator. And it's a steep learning curve for me, is, you know, how to package community-based research processes for short application, conveying the emergence of CBR processes via, you know, somewhat compartmentalized and somewhat rigid application forms, and to also understand how to leverage effectively institutional resources to support community-based research. So both COPs at Cbrc, at CBR Canada were extremely helpful in that regard, because I joined both, and, you know, whenever I have time, I try to attend both research praxis and organizational culture COPs. So through this community of practices, I'm able to learn from other practitioners and research administrators how they're able to navigate an advanced community-based research in their respective institutions, and how they reflect on their practice. I'm able to listen to their experiences in different institutional settings, learn about emerging good practices. And of course, I always take a note of what I think might be reproducible within York University context, and also what might be indeed adopted at York. What could we change? What could we start doing to advance community-based research institutionally? And for example, at a recent discussion, which technically, Sarah, wasn't a community of practice, it was an interactive discussion on COVID-19 impact on CBR. So at that recent discussion, which I'm so happy I was able to attend last week, I was in the same breakout room with two other research officers supporting CBR, also quite new in their roles. And we had a great exchange and some good networking. And at this, you know, I'm looking forward to each discussion and a community of practice meeting facilitated by Cbrc. So that's my 2 cents. And thank you, Sarah. Sarah, are we ready at this point to take questions and answers, or do you want to continue?
We can open it up for some
okay.
general questions about the COP and some of the partnership building we do, if that makes sense. Or I can continue on with the presentation. I really kind of, I defer to everyone in the group in terms of what makes sense for your lunch.
Yeah. Well, any burning questions, let us know. Feel free to ask them or type them in the chat. I'll check the chat box.
While folks are kind of thinking and percolating, I've dropped a link in the chat for how to sign up for our community of practices. They're set like many months in advance. You can sign up every month, or you can sign up all at once.
I see Minerva has her hand up. So
yeah, thank you so much. I'm from Shuli, the EE faculty lead, and I'm interested to learn more about some examples of projects to understand how we at Shuli, we could maybe be more involved in this, and how we can develop our own type of projects?
That's a great question, Minerva. In a moment, I'm going to actually share our programming schedule for the fall, in which we're going to talk about exactly that. So that is a great segue. So I'm going to just parking lot that just for a moment, but I promise you I will get there.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions about the community of practice? We do, as I mentioned, we do have two. So they both have their own kind of unique strengths and styles, and they're really just they're really a tremendous place. Folks often comment after the community of practices. I'm more involved in the community of practice, that's the praxis-based one, so less administrative one, and folks are always like, this is such a lovely group. Like it really is. People are so willing and open to troubleshoot and say, well, how are you managing this within your organization? How are you managing this? You know, and what's neat about the COPs is they came out of the pandemic. They came out of this kind of moment when community-based researchers across the country were thinking, oh my, like, how do we do this? How do we move forward with our work? How do we redistribute resources from universities into communities? How do we, kind of navigate some of the bureaucracy to make sure that we are doing very action-oriented research that responds directly and immediately to community needs? And that's how the COPs came about, really out of this need for knowledge sharing and connecting and learning from one another. There's no other questions. I'll share my slide, and there might be more questions as we move along.
I have another question.
Oh, sure.
Sorry to jump before you move. You mentioned about these two community of practice. One is praxis, the other one has a name. About organizational culture, has a different name or specific name, or is just generic organizational culture? So that's not a question, but the question is are these groups open for members? Can we join, or what's the idea behind?
Yes, fabulous question, Minerva. And I'm so thankful that you asked it, because there's a really important piece that I missed. So one of the ways that we work as a member-based organization is that institutional members or community organizations pay to be part of CBR Canada as a member. That membership covers all staff, faculty, students as part of York. So if you are affiliated with York, you are able to attend anything that we offer.
Thank you so much. Okay, cool.
No problem. And it's a good question. I mean, we're membership-based organizations are fairly new, and we're still figuring out, how do we communicate this to our partners so folks know that they can come, that we want them to come, and so absolutely, please join up and attend.
I just want to pitch in with some information about the registration process. So when I was registering for those COPs, and that was relatively recently, I believe maybe at the end of spring, there is a drop-down menu that asks you to select an option if you're an individual member or you're an institutional member. And when you select that, click institutional member, and then there will be another drop-down menu that asks you to indicate what is the institution you're joining from, and it's easy. We select York, and you're in. And then you will start receiving the invitations for the COPs. And it's always good to check out the whole calendar of events. And I also signed up for the newsletter and all the updates. And perhaps, Sarah, you will also share with us you mentioned you will share the programming schedule.
I will.
So there is a lot to look forward to.
Absolutely. And once what I'll do, I don't have access to the page right now, but after I go through this, I'll pop a link in the chat of more information on membership, just in case you know other organizations that are interested in getting involved. We do have different tiered pricing points. So perhaps not surprisingly, institutional members, large organizations such as universities, pay a bit more. But for a nonprofit organization, I believe the membership rate's $100 a year. So we tier it accordingly. We also have individual members. So folks whose university or organization is not a member, but they want to be involved. We have those, and there's graduate student pricing as well. So I was an individual member, for example, before I became a CBR Canada staff, and those rates are pretty reasonable, especially for graduate students. All right. So our second goal is capacity bridging. This is a very intentional play, not capacity building, capacity bridging, to really honor, the unique experiences and skill sets of everyone coming to the network. We really do learn from each other in this network. And so as part of this goal, we develop resources and foster community-based research excellence at an individual, community, institutional, and systems level. One of the ways we do this, which is our most highly subscribed program, is our webinar and discussions. These can have upwards to 100 people per webinar discussion, sometimes 200. And this is where, to speak to your question, Minerva, we're really able to highlight different community-based research projects. So for example, our last year, in the fall, winter, and spring, we hosted an 8-part learning series on decolonizing community-based research, which was just absolutely tremendous, where we learned from Indigenous scholars and practitioners across Turtle Island. All of the webinars are recorded and stored online. Okay, so there's and I'll put a link in the chat in a moment with that, but you can access all of those online in terms of the recordings of the webinars. We also have live discussions. And so the way that this works is we found we were always running out of time. We wanted to always discuss more. And so we always lead our webinars. We will have a webinar, and then week following, we have a live discussion where the facilitators from the webinar have a further conversation about the themes that came up during their presentation. And I'm going to share our series with you in a moment. So just kind of hold that thought. And then the second way we do capacity bridging is through community-based research and excellence training. That is essentially a professional development workshop on community-based research that we have hosted at a number of different institutions. So our current learning series this year is on community-based research in COVID-19 pandemic, addressing widening inequities and amplifying community-based visions for change. We kickstarted this series in September. So the 2 events that have already passed, but aren't on this list, is we had a live discussion that Julia alluded to earlier. She attended. This live discussion was so successful, we did it twice, and it was called Looking Forward, Looking Back, Community-Based Research and the COVID-19 Pandemic, where we essentially turned the mic over to our members to say, let's reflect on the last 18 months. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about the impacts of the pandemic on the communities we were both a part of and aligned with, to think about what we learned from the pandemic that we might apply moving forward into our work. And for those of you who missed that, we don't record our live discussions because they're live discussions and we want folks to feel comfortable participating. But we always create an infographic coming out of the discussion notes. And so that infographic is going to be released very shortly, probably in the next 2 weeks. And there were just tremendous suggestions that people had in those groups. So for example, I was part of a group and they were talking about how to build like pandemic responses into a budget in advance. Folks talked about how they were able to channel resources directly into communities through their research projects. And so there was a lot of sharing and learning that was passed on. For our upcoming series, I'm going to put the link in the chat here. No, I'll put the link in the chat after. It's not letting me copy and paste it from my my notes, so I'll do that afterwards. But coming up on November 11th and November 18th, we have a webinar presentation by a project called Shift, documenting the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on community-based research and identifying opportunities for change. This is led by Dr. Zach Marshall and his team. And this is a SSHRC-funded project that essentially explored the impact of the pandemic on community-based researchers, including peer researchers as well. December 9th and 16th, we've got a webinar and a live discussion called Closing the Opportunity Gap for Racialized and Under-Resourced Communities through the Community School Initiative. And this is a project led by Dr. Artavan Azardad, Devin Jones, Sally Udabab, and Bryce Bartman. And these are folks out of Wilfrid Laurier University. And the Community School Initiative, I believe, is actually located in the Jane and Finch area in Toronto. And so they're going to be talking about issues of racial justice and equity and COVID-19 as it connects to the education sector. And in January, we haven't set the dates yet, but we'll be learning from the USANA's research partnership by Dr. Jeffrey Anselus, Shauna Pelche, Sarah Chown, and team. And this is a project of an Indigenous-led mental health program that came out of the pandemic. So lots of really, really excellent, impactful projects. And I will put the link in the chat as soon as I stop sharing, once my computer allows me to do it. And just to note that the first is always a webinar and the second is a live discussion. And we do the infographics after each live discussion as a way to kind of keep that knowledge mobilization and knowledge translation piece moving. So on that note, our third goal is knowledge mobilization. So we really try to act as a communications and knowledge sharing hub for community-based research. We have our news and events, and I'm going to put the newsletter in the chat as well momentarily. This is a great way to kind of keep abreast of what's happening. We also have communication contacts at every single university, and the goal of the communication contact is also to share our work to the members. But you can always sign up for our newsletter if you want to really make sure that you get the news directly. We also have a map of community-based research centers and people. And featured resources. So this is another way to learn about different projects. So we put out e-blasts, which are kind of short updates on what we're doing, and then a more fulsome newsletter about 3 times a year. And the newsletter has featured stories on different community-based research projects, different resources, different ways to get involved, etc. And our last and final goal is really championing community-based research. And so we do this through strengthening communities and impacting policy, cultivating partnerships with funded and allied initiatives, and awarding community-based research excellence. So for example, we sit on a series of kind of pan-Canadian gatherings, and Michael with Research Impact is connected to some of this work in terms of working with other community campus organizations that are devoted to strengthening these partnerships. We work closely with SSHRC on a few different initiatives. And then more recently, we just launched, as of this past spring, our Community-Based Research Excellence Awards. And SSHRC actually partnered with us on this award series, and we hope to have these awards again this year. We awarded 3 different types of awards: a Emerging Researcher Award, an award to a community-based research partnership, as well as a kind of an award that recognized the lifetime achievements of more senior community-based researchers. So Bud Hall was awarded that for the year. And I can also put more information in the chat about that. And one other piece to note, I don't have a slide on this, But this year we're doing something a little bit differently with our annual general meeting. So as a nonprofit organization, we have an AGM, and we're going to be opening the public, opening the latter half of our AGM up to the public. We've sent invitations to 2 representatives from each member institution. So we'll be sending it to York. I think those invitations may have gone out yesterday. And what's neat about this AGM is we're focusing it on stories of impact. And I mentioned this because we're going to record this and we'll put it online. But one of our stories of impact is from a York researcher. Sarah Flicker from the Faculty of Environmental Studies is going to be presenting alongside an amazing team of young women, the Young Indigenous Women's Utopia Project, which is a project happening in Treaty 6 territory, to talk about the work they've been doing. So just a bit of a shout out there. All right, so I've got a few more slides and then I'll close things up and we'll ask for questions, and I'll pop all these links in the chat for you. So stay in touch, please. This is the best way, our newsletter, to find out about what we're doing. We also have a Twitter account, and again, I'll put this in the chat. We hope that folks might sign up for our upcoming webinar presentation by Shift. This really will be a treat, and continue a lot of the conversations we had at the last 2 events, but in a much more, in a slightly more formalized way, because it's through a research project on the impact of COVID-19 on CBR. And of course, we hope that people stay in touch. We really are driven by our members and the needs of our members. So we are always constantly shifting and changing, adapting. And so we really want to ensure that we support you in your work as community-based researchers and administrators. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Here we go, so I can see everyone, and just give me a moment. I'm gonna pop those links in the chat. My Zoom isn't cooperating today.
Sarah, you can also send those links to me by email, and then I will share them in chat.
Okay,
if that works.
Fabulous. I don't have too many.
If I may suggest, is it possible to send an email as opposed to in the chat, because it's difficult to save from the chat?
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to be saving the entire chat conversation, and we'll place it on our Teams page. So all of the links and answers to any of the questions will be available as well. There's I know Byron has posted. There's within the last year or so, we've created a dedicated page for this community of practice on Microsoft Teams. If anybody does not have access to it, you can reach out to Byron and we'll make sure that you are part of that.
Yeah, can I reach now? I'm reaching out.
There we go. Consider it done. I love it.
Byron, me too, because I don't think I've been a member of this Teams conversation or a chat. So thank you, Michael, for mentioning it. Sarah, I have a question, if I may start the round of questions and answers. How to access Cbrc Canada as a knowledge mobilization platform? Assuming I have, I know a researcher who I think could be featured in Cbrc events, or or maybe there is a toolkit to share or other resources. So where do I start?
That's a great question, Julia. So because we're a pretty small organization, we do things pretty organically and responsively, I'd like to think. And so there's a few different ways. If you have a CBR project that you want to feature, and just to clarify, these are usually projects that are already underway. So sometimes folks have asked me like, oh, I want to pitch a project. Usually isn't the space to pitch a project. It's usually a space to report on the findings of a project or your processes. And we do it in a few different ways. Sometimes folks get in touch with me directly, and I'm happy to share my email, and we schedule people in. Every year with our learning series, we have a theme. So as I mentioned, last year, the theme was around decolonizing community-based research. This year, the theme is on community-based research in COVID-19. And we actually opened up our series this year in these conversations I was mentioning with asking people at the events for nominations. And so folks emailed me and said, I've got a project on this, or I've got a project on this. And so we take ideas and suggestions that way. And we really try to profile folks in different ways. So as I mentioned, we also have our featured resources, and sometimes we profile people that way. And so if you have any questions, really just get in touch. I'll put my email in the chat, and that's usually the best way to go. And if you have ideas for a session next year, also send them my way, because we are always thinking, a few months in advance. I see a few.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah. I see a few other hands. I see Michael and Stephen.
Go ahead, Stephen.
You sure?
Absolutely.
You went up first.
It's all good.
Okay. Okay, Sarah, thanks a million. That was really great. I really enjoyed your presentation. And in particular, what caught my attention was this whole notion of the praxis COP, which is kind of cool because, it sets the expectation right at the beginning. Okay, this is a safe space. Come, bring us your problems, and we'll try to help. And I was wondering, because I've had a little bit of work with community-based research, and I was a project manager for a partnership grant for a while and have been involved in a couple of applications. I'm batting 500 on those right now. But and I was trying to think of, well, what are the rough edges around community-based participatory research? Like where are the edges that you find yourself coming up against? And I can imagine some of those stories from Praxis. You must be hearing similar stories. And then you mentioned SSHRC, and that was in my mind too. And I thought how great it is that you're doing these awards, but there's impediments within SSHRC's funding structures, and probably with other funders as well. I'm not just picking on SSHRC, but others as well too, where the old model is there and the new model's kind of coming in. How do you mediate those rough edges between what you're trying to do and what funders may imagine, and what are those conversations like, and where do you see the best chance of progress?
Oh wow, that's a great question. That's such a great question. And I would actually invite you to bring that question to the COP. That is exactly what we discuss in the community of practice. And it's less so much CBR Canada leading the show, and it's really like the folks at the table, and whatever people bring to the COP is what we discuss, and folks would bring up, there's so many different kind of conversation threads we've had over the years, and I've only been partial to some of them, but certainly having conversations about navigating institutional and funding structures is a conversation that comes up a lot, and the community-based research needs to be very responsive and adaptive and flexible, and our funding structures are not always as flexible and adaptive and responsive. So it's like, a lot of conversations at the COP are around exactly that, of troubleshooting and problem solving and sharing stories. Well, we did this, or how do we do this? And it's so there's no kind of cookie cutter response, but just to say that that is absolutely a conversation that we have regularly, and whatever the group brings is what the group brings. The community-based research praxis, they both run slightly differently, and Julia has been much more involved in the administrator one. I haven't attended that one, but I have attended the community-based research praxis that tends to be a bit more academic. And the way that one runs is we have a rotating facilitator. And the structure is as follows. We usually go into 3 sets of breakout groups. Each breakout group is about 10 to 15 minutes and is guided by a question. And the questions are determined by the facilitator that week. And so we go into a group, we discuss the question, we come back out, we reflect quietly, we go into another group, kind of rinse and repeat 3 times. And one of the benefits of that particular structure, I think anyway, is that the conversations are highly emergent. They're highly responsive to what, to the moment in, what folks are working with. And because we have a diverse rotating kind of cast of facilitators, it keeps things fresh. So we aren't running the show. It's really the members and the network that's running those discussions.
Yeah.
And it varies. Like last time I was there, we had a whole conversation about citational politics, and how do we ensure that we're leveraging and prioritizing the work of Black and Indigenous scholars in community-based research projects. So every week.
That's interesting. Oh yeah, there's probably no end of meaty stuff to chew on. That's fantastic. Thanks.
There's a follow-up question within the chat, Sarah, from Dina, around the management of the power dynamics within the breakouts. So I was wondering if you might be able to share anything about the process or governance around these conversations.
That's a great question, Dina. So we're not in the breakout group conversations generally as staff at CBR Canada, so they're self-moderated. That's not to suggest that power dynamics don't exist. They always exist in any given space, but the groups are really moderated by those in the room to navigate. And we also find that it tends to be not the same group of people coming back, but it's a smaller group. It's 15 people. And so we try every few months to kind of stop and check in to see what's working, what's not working, what do we need to adapt or change.
Sarah, I had a question about the map. In one of the objectives, you shared the notion of the national CBR map. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about that. What was the purpose? Have there been any early adopters? Has there been any kind of pivot around that? I haven't checked out the site in enough detail lately, so I mean, I can check it out myself, but any insights around how well that has been developing for CBRC, please?
That's a great question, Michael. So the map predates me, so I'll do my best to respond. I joined CBR Canada in June, and it was developed long before I arrived. So I don't have all the details, but my general understanding is that the map was really designed to kind of connect and bridge community-based researchers across Canada. It's also an area we're looking to expand. So we just had a meeting last week, actually, to kind of put it on our agenda to think about how we can better utilize the map and ensure that we're able to share the map with other folks. But in principle and in theory, the idea is that you go on, it's connected to Google Maps, and you can add yourself to the map as a researcher to find other researchers. And I will put a link to that in the chat as well. All of this is on our website. 1 sec. Here we go. I'm also going to put a link to our, and we'll share this all out afterwards, to our awards program because it's pretty neat. It's brand new. And our award recipients last year, Miriam Khan at Laurier, doing really, really amazing work there. The Parents Advocacy Project team, which is I think a harm reduction related project in kind of central Canada. And then Bud Hall, as I mentioned, was the Leadership Award recipient. And we'll be announcing the awards hopefully again this year. And so a great place to connect or share with your graduate students. And thanks all for those typing in the chat. I know your lunch hour is precious, and you may have other meetings and places to go to and food to eat.
I see another question in the chat, Sarah. Are there any updates on the next Ctu Expo conference?
Great question, Lorna. Those conversations are in the works. I can't yet disclose them now, but know that they will be shared soon. We are also hoping that we might be able to do some kind of mini gatherings online before then. We're trying to figure out the complications of in-person conferencing and who is going to be hosting the next Ctu Expo. But those conversations are very much underway.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I see Dina is raising hand as well. Dina.
Yes, sorry, I know everyone wants to move to their lunch plans, but I want to squeeze a quick question because I'm really I understand that with decolonizing, much of the focus or much of the deserved focus is on Indigenous ways of knowing. But I wonder if, and I hear and I try to browse the website quickly, I wonder if there's also any resources on international partnership development and collaboration between Global North and Global South. This is a particular interest area of mine.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dina. So I've just made that note of your question here, because this is very much like how we roll. You know, folks provide suggestions, and then when we're thinking about designing future programs, this is how it happens. To highlight one particular resource that might be helpful, and I'm just going to find it on the website here so I can tell you where it is. We did have last May, this predated me, but in May 2021, we had an international panel on decolonizing community-based research, and it was very much focused on folks working across the global South, talking about what decolonizing CBR means in different contexts globally. And that panel was led by Catherine Hoppers, Nakata Mercy, Danilo Pavel Ramos, and the facilitators were Crystal Tremblay and Peter Taylor. And that's recorded online on our website, so you can see the whole panel there. It's under webinars and discussion, and I'll pop that into the chat as well, but we can definitely send all of these links out. They're all essentially sublinks of our website. And I know that the COP has some other business to attend to, so I don't know if there's any final questions or Michael and Julia, if I should pass it off to both of you. This has been delightful.
If there's more questions, we'll make the time for it. We can use our updates within the chat function. So if any of your offices are hosting meetings, if there are events you want us to know about, please feel free to put it in the chat or on the Teams page. We'll work to make sure that gets broadcast out to all the community of practice members. But this is valuable time having Sarah with us. And if there are any further questions, we'll just keep on rocking. But I will put a hard stop on it at the top of the hour. Thanks.
I just wanted to thank you, Sarah. Thank you for being with us today. And it's amazing. Every time I have a conversation with you or attend a Cbrc meeting, I learn something new. And it's usually amazing stuff. So thank you for your time with us.
Of course. Yeah, it's lovely to be here. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's kind of cool because I used to be at York. So it's nice how these things come full circle. And we do hope you come out and join our events. That's really where the magic happens. My background and training is as a popular educator, and so when I'm running programs, I really try to make the events as open and participant led as possible, knowing of course that people can opt out whenever you need to, so you can turn your camera off and eat your lunch, or you can engage in a more kind of front end kind of way, but they really are amazing places to network. I have personally met so many people at these events, which is kind of a neat it's neat to see in terms of the pandemic. I think brought so many challenges. But the other thing it brought us, I think, was opportunities to connect more broadly across institutions, through Zoom. And so we're really trying to leverage that right now. Any other thoughts? Or I'd love to hear what folks are working on. I know there's only 7 more minutes left, but just to open that up. or if you have ideas on where, we've already heard talking about, thinking about the global north, global south in terms of conversations around decolonization and CBR. If there's other areas that you want us to profile, please let us know.
Maybe I can just say, just in terms of something that the Community Engagement Center, which is located in the Jane and Finch community, has been working on, and that is called the Jane Finch Community Research Partnership. And they've been doing some really exciting work in terms of how do researchers work in very localized, hyper-local communities, and what are the ethics involved in that? How do you orient people to that kind of work and relationship building in those communities? And so a number of people on this call are more actively involved in that, but kind of an interesting initiative that's happening here at York.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that end, there might be some overlaps with our December webinar and live discussion series, because the Community School Initiative, I know, is located in the Jane and Finch area. And there'll be the webinar and then an entire hour devoted to talking about that work and the possible connections there.
I put the link for the Jane Finch CRP in the chat if people want to take a look.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie.
And it's really amazing. I want to give a shout out to both Talisha, who is a huge part of this, and Byron Gray, who really are the leaders on this project.
I'm going to check it out. I've already opened it in my browser, so thank you. This looks great.
I know within our Mobilize You course, we've had the pleasure of having Talisha speak for a few years now, and it's always interesting every year to hear about the significant and incremental steps that this group has taken. So kudos to the entire team. I know there's a really strong research engagement workshop sort of booklet that's come out. I think would be really valuable for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, fabulous work.
Yeah, shameless plug. If you are interested in taking the modules that have been created by community residents and community members, it's there on that same website. They are accepting donations as well to look at the sustainability of this table. And so, yeah, there's a lot there.
Oh, this is so cool. I know some folks that I think would be very interested in this. So I'm glad, Byron, you flagged that, because I'm going to send this email out to a few folks afterwards.
On a separate strand, folks, our community of practice is going to convene again before the end of the fall term. We'll be discussing York's engagement around the Carnegie Community Engagement designation. There's been a fair amount of work going on through the Provost's office and the President's office around that to explore what's possible. I think it will be a very worthwhile update for all of us, but we'll be broadcasting that along with the relevant details around date and time, but just an FYI.
And before we head off, I just want to thank all of you for taking your time on your lunch hour to hear a little bit more about CBR Canada. And I hope I see you again in a Zoom room somewhere, or possibly in person on campus at the next Ctu Expo event. But please do come out. Would be great to see some familiar faces.
I encourage folks to join Cbrc community of practice, either research practice or organizational culture, provided that you still, keep up with this one as well.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think we're concluding for the afternoon. To Julia for her facilitation and leadership, to Sarah for your time and sharing the important work you're doing, but for all of you making the time to join us when there's no shortage of options, the least of which is, maybe having some lunch. Thanks. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to connecting with you soon. Keep well, everybody.